What is going on, everyone? GR Weekly here with me, Matt McCarthy, Senior Redraft Analyst for GridironRatings.com. And we're talking about the week 3 in review. 14 games from Sunday. We had some records being broken, one especially by my guy here and Justin Tucker. We had a near sacks record get broken by Justin Fields in his rookie start over there for Chicago. I think we actually had a sacks record setting that aside. Myles Garrett, 4.5 for the Cleveland Browns. We had some good football. We had some bad football. We had some things I was very right about. We had some things I was very wrong about. We're going to get into. We have 14 games. We had no time to waste. So let's get right into it with our first game, Atlanta versus New York Giants. Atlanta come out on top, 70-14. I don't know how many times I'm going to say this year the Atlanta Falcons, I guess, or the New York Giants are going to win. But this was not a very interesting game. There was not many games I could watch the little condensed version on. But 38 minutes was the runtime for this one on Game Pass, and it made sense because it was a boring, bad football game. We're going to kick it off, though, on the Atlanta Falcons side. Matt Ryan, one of the two quarterbacks I thought, just make sure my mic is the right way. Yes. Okay. One of the two quarterbacks from Sunday that I thought looked pretty toast. The other one being Ben Roethlisberger. But the one real thing as to why Atlanta seems so bad right now is that there's no downfield presence. They're not getting air under the ball. No passes with air yards of 20 yards or more in week 3. Matter of fact, we have none through all of the 3 weeks, as his 6 yards per attempt for Matt Ryan is a near yard and a half shorter than his average over the last 5 seasons. If there's no downfield home run, big play threat for an offense, well, that's a big issue because you're going to have defenses just play you more straight up and you're going to not have much risk for the deep balls happening. So we have guys like Ridley and Kyle Pitts all being a little bit under what we kind of expected because there's no big plays coming out of Atlanta. But one big thing from our preview was Cordell Patterson. Patterson, I think, is taking advantage of Russell Gage missing time. He's filled the secondary role with 14 targets over the last 2 games. Mike Davis is indeed the lead back, but if Patterson is going to see this much involvement, especially through the air, then he is valuable. We can have Mike Davis and Cordell Patterson both be options for Atlanta. To be decided really when Pitts is more targeted and we have Russell Gage returning. But as of right now, if Cordell Patterson is going to be a fancy option for us that you can have a safe sort of 8 to 12 sort of point outlook, that is valuable because running back stinks. It was really bad going into week 3. In week 4, I got to see what the matchups are going to be, but there's not many teams, I think, right now that can say they have 3 running backs on their roster. If it's in a normal 2 running back, 2 receiver, and a flex sort of roster construction, that you'd be happy starting. I'm also not overly worried about Kyle Pitts. 3 weeks in, new coaching staff, rookie tight end. It's disappointing for those who went out and drafted him, say, in the 3rd round. But for those who were drafting him a little bit later, there's still sort of a work up to kind of see what his full potential is. I wouldn't be looking to trade him away right now if you were someone who did put a lot of investment into Pitts. But for myself, who was kind of down on him, I could take a half victory lap, but I'm not going to do so because I said Josh Allen would be a worse start than Justin Fields this week. So I've said some dumb stuff myself. On to New York side. The one big thing was Daniel Jones going into the game. Shepard was hurt early. Ingram with another bad fumble. This was looking like the best quarterback matchup through 2 weeks, but it really just showcases that the New York Giants are an offense that is not playing for 2021 standards. They are particularly not a very innovative offense. Kenny Golladay, I think with Shepard, if he were to miss time, we might be seeing a little bit more of the potential we kind of wanted out of him. But it also showcases that while Kadarius Toney, you may not have known it, but from the box score numbers, but he was the 3rd most highest snapped player of the skills players for the New York Giants. He's just not seeing the involvement for someone that they went on and spent a 1st-round pick on. When you go and see guys like Jamar Chase being the 2nd leading touchdown scorer in the NFL, and we have guys like Kadarius Toney who can barely see a pass or 2 his way in this New York Giants offense. We do have one bright spot here, which is Saquon Barkley. 100 total yards in this game and a score when he goes Shamu diving over the top for a score on the 1 yard line. New Orleans and the LA Rams in 2 of his next 3 games. So at least we have some hope that he can at least produce in some accordance to numbers. When there's a bad running back week like we had in week 3, he should finish out as a top 12 back, because it was kind of gross out there when you guys like Peyton Barber as one of the best players on the week at the position. And here's where I was mega wrong. Washington versus Buffalo. Half this game I was extremely right, and half this game I was extremely wrong. At least I'll start with the side I was right, which was the away team, which was Washington. Washington losing this game 43-21 to Buffalo. But Antonio Gibson, that was our one big thing going into the game after the big J.D. McKissic work. Well, he does come away with a huge reception this game, 73 yards and a score. That kind of saved his day. So did the Logan Thomas late touchdown, but not a lot of things that really went right for the Washington football team. McLaurin was a player I did not have in my top 12. I thought you can kind of get away from in some aspects this week. It does come out and not have a particularly great performance, around like 10 points in full PPR. But this Buffalo DST showcased, I think, in a very solid looking offense last week in New York Giants. And they faltered here against Buffalo. This Buffalo defense to me is one that you don't go in with high expectations for your offensive skills players. Moving on to the Buffalo side, but yes, Josh Allen definitely one of the talks of the week. 449 yards through 2 weeks, 3 total touchdowns, a pick and a fumble, and 4 sacks. Well, then he showcases in this week 3 matchup with 358 yards, 4 touchdowns, and with a rushing score added in there. His 8.3 yards per attempt, almost 3 yards more than his averages in week 1 or week 2. Allen picked apart from that very first drive, and I thought I was a little bit in trouble ranking him as my quarterback 11 on the week. The Washington pass defense was playing very well through 2 weeks. The Buffalo passing offense was playing very poorly, just around 50% completion percentage last week against the Miami Dolphins in a blowout win. Something had to give, and it gave in the way of the Buffalo Bills kind of just absolutely torching Washington. They do have Houston next week. Josh Allen be ranked in accordance, should be one of the top 3 quarterback plays of that week. But moving on from quarterback to the running backs, Zach Moss. It's going to be an issue, I think, week to week of who is going to be the beneficiary of however they're going to divvy up the touches, the snaps, all that sort of stuff. As he outplays Singletary in every asset, scoring, he currently has more touchdowns. Made a joke that he has more touchdowns than the entirety of the New York Jets, and he missed the game, did not play in week 1, and only 10 total touches in week 2. But if we're going to have that as a flip-flop situation between Zach Moss and Devin Singletary, I don't think either of them are in consideration for being a top 24 running back on a weekly basis. You're hoping that the touchdowns and the touches go that way, but it's very much I don't want to be any side of this coin flip. If I had to pick one, I am still picking Devin Singletary, but I say that with not a lot of confidence. But I do have some confidence in these receivers, though. Houston, Kansas City, and Tennessee in the next 3 games, outside of Stephon Diggs. Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley should be off of your waiver wire if they're on someone else's team. Well, that's a bummer, but you should be having them on your team. Add them to the back end of your roster. I've seen Sanders out there in a few leagues. I've seen Beasley out there in the few leagues. We've had some inclinations at a certain point this passing game would get going. I thought it would take another week past this Washington one. It would happen in week 4 against Houston, but they showcased out that they are indeed a good offense like we kind of thought they should be. So both of those players should be looked at as waiver options. Chicago versus Cleveland. There is not much to talk about in this game because Justin Fields was god-awful. Cleveland wins 26-6. One team that has 418 total yards and one had 47. Justin Fields had 1 net yard through the air. Sacked 9 times. Matt Nagy came out and said he does not know who is going to be starting here in week 4. He has 3 options. That is Andy Dalton, Justin Fields, and, of course, Nick Foles as their 3rd option. And this entire offense just completely suffered with them not being able to just do relatively anything right through the air. 6 completions, that is less than the amount of sacks he sustained. Matt Nagy doesn't know what he's doing with Justin Fields. Fields, I thought he would be a good option with his rushing. That was not showcased. If he starts week 4, I'm not touching him. I need to see it. No, thank you. I'm staying far and away from this. Allen Robinson has really suffered this season with the quarterback play. If you're looking to get a buy low opportunity, Allen Robinson is definitely a player that people are going to be looking at because I don't think anyone has any real thing to what they want to do with him. Dave Montgomery as well. They were not able to produce any sort of bit of good offense against this Cleveland side. Over in Cleveland, though, able to do basically anything they wanted. Odell Beckham, nice to see him start this game. 29% target share out of the gate, which is massive for our sort of confidence in having him as a player we can put some trust in going forward as a top 30 receiver or higher option. And Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, they're just able to do whatever they wanted at will. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because Kareem Hunt went out and had a 28-point fantasy performance, and touchdowns not accounted for. This is probably his best sort of points total on the season, outside of anything happening possibly Nick Chubb or just an explosion we're not foreseeing. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, at least on him in a completely blown out win. Baltimore versus Detroit. Baltimore wins 19-17. Off the foot of Justin Tucker up here on the 9, not the Nike logo. But a 66-yard field goal for the win, NFL record. It must stink to be a Detroit Lions fan. That's all I can say on that regard. But starting off with the Baltimore side, or one big thing heading into the week was the Tyson Williams, Latavius Murray sort of lean, and they decided to run the ball a total of 15 times across Murray, Williams, and Devonta Freeman. Williams' usage in this game was just bizarre, and I believe this is going to be a continuous headache. An RB2 consideration for either player, I don't particularly know. I know this team wants to run the ball. I thought this game would get a little bit more higher scoring. There's some issues to that, mostly being Marquise Brown dropping 3 possible touchdown receptions in this game. But there's an issue of if they're not going to even settle on one guy, and they've particularly not done that in the past. They have split running back work. And you also have Lamar Jackson being the best rusher on this team on his own right. But if they're not going to at least give one of these guys a good, healthy amount of work, and they're not going to at least give both players like 10 carries apiece, then there's no one I want to start out of this backfield outside of Lamar Jackson, because that is definitely one thing I did not really expect with him. He's currently 8th in yards per attempt, which is amazing considering where they're usually at, which is one of the lowest in the NFL. But Rashad Bateman is currently practicing this week. Waivers are coming up. If he is out there, and you can pick it up now, if he's still on IR, you can stash him for another week, do so. But at a certain point, he is going to be activated, and I think that's going to be a big damper on what Marquise Brown could do. But I think this opens up the passing game for Baltimore even more. Rashad Bateman, I'm very excited to see what he can do in this Baltimore offense. Moving on to Detroit. One big thing was Jared Goff, and I was really hoping for this to be more of a shootout game with the issues Baltimore had on the defensive side between the injuries and the COVID situations. They were not able to really do too much of that, unfortunately only scoring 17 points in the game. Deandre Swift, just incredible numbers. Only trailing Harris after his bizarre week 3 game in receptions. I think he's a pretty safe consideration as a top 12 back. This is one of the tougher matchups I could foresee for him on the season. It's going to be very hard for me in PPR purposes to not be ranking him as a top 12 just plug-in option if he's seeing this much work through the air, because that's extremely valuable. And I'm not particularly worried about Hockenson as well. I kept flip-flopping on which I prefer between Hockenson and Andrews this week. Andrews, of course, on the 100-yard game. Hockenson barely scrapping together like 3 points in full PPR. But his even with the 2 targets, he's only behind Kelsey's 26 and Darren Waller's 33 at the position. So if you're going to be overtly worried on Hockenson, I wouldn't do so. Neat for Khalif Raymond having 10 targets in this game, but outside of the running backs and Hockenson, I'm still kind of out on the receivers, as Quez Watkins was the only other player on Detroit that I was actually no, that is not the receiver that receiver I was interested was Cephas, Quintus Cephas. Watkins is over on Philadelphia, who are kicking off in like 30 minutes. But not much else to really go on off of there in Detroit. Indianapolis versus Tennessee. Tennessee winning this game 25-16. One big thing over on the Colts side was Taylor in the red zone, and unfortunately, he was out-touched in that regard to Nyheim Hines, as Hines had around 3 carries in the red zone to Taylor's 1. That's an issue. We're going to have to be looking for more of that because Nyheim Hines right now is pushing himself into running back 2 consideration with safety, and Jonathan Taylor is starting to drift out of the RB1 consideration. with him not being able to really convert from the 5-yard line, now losing carries from inside the 20 to Hines, uptick for Hines' value, downtick for what we can consider out of Jonathan Taylor. And there was a lot of issues all around on this Indianapolis side for sure. Because I will tell you this, I really thought that we were going. I really thought that Jacob Eason started this game. I will say that until much later in the day, which kind of showcases how much I think Wentz is just a non-factor for this game right now. We do have identified a favorite target, which would be Michael Pittman having back-to-back dozen targets in both weeks 2 and week 3. So we need to at least give the consideration if we're treating Brandon Cooks in the sort of light that he's just being force-fed work. We have to start thinking about Michael Pittman as well, is moving him closer to a top 36 or higher receiver and no longer ranking him like myself in the 40s. So something for definitely in consideration in that regard. Otherwise, outside of Hines and outside of Taylor and Pittman, not much else really like on this Indianapolis side going forward. And we have to really start talking about just the total amplitude of the offense as a whole. Because it really comes down to Wentz, who has barely scrapped together 250 yards passing in any game, just has one game of over 250, but just at 251. Colts offense currently 13th most attempts with a bottom 6 in yards and bottom 10 in total points. They're passing a ton, but not getting a lot of production out of it in the real scoring department, which is really what it all matters to. Colts defense, on the other hand, currently allowing the 12th most passing yards on the fewest passing attempts allowed. And there's more to that. Let's go talking about this whole Colts defense, right? Really what it mattered to Tennessee. Colts defense is currently seeing the fewest pass attempts in the league at 80, but they are allowing third most passing touchdowns allowed at 9, fifth most net yards per attempt, and 5th most in rushing yards and attempts allowed. Now, they've kind of been bullied by the Rams, the Seahawks, and the Tennessee Titans. These are quality offenses that I can understand why the defense is kind of a tough time of it. But we did lose some players on the Tennessee side, and we still get to see the results that we've kind of panned out with this Colts defense. Julio Jones disappeared kind of late in the game, and A.J. Brown was hurt in this one. No timeline in the current moment with a hamstring injury. He was our one big thing going into this with his 17 targets, 7 receptions over the previous 2 games, just not coming down with a lot of his receptions. Unfortunately, we might not see him next week. We'll have to see exactly how it's all going to play out for him. But otherwise, Julio just Derrick Henry absolutely stomps in this game, another 100-yard performance. But Julio, I just don't understand why I didn't see any injury sort of situation on him, just kind of disappeared late in the one. He only played around half of the Tennessee snaps. There's not anything new for Julio. He will have games where he just gets banged up, constantly just kind of battling through and dealing with different injuries throughout his career. But need to know more about if he's going to be missing time with the Titans and the Jags and the Jets next on the Tennessee schedule. We're on to the LA Chargers versus Kansas City Chiefs. LA wins this one 30-24. And our one big thing was going back to the well and all these LA Charger players. And it really came through all besides Jared Cook, with Herbert, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, and Austin Eckler all being slam dunks in this one. We got to talk about Mike Williams for sure, though, because is he a threat to Keenan Allen? So through 3 weeks, Keenan Allen, 33 targets, 20 receptions, 250 yards, and a score. Mike Williams, 31 targets, 22 receptions, 295 yards, and 4 touchdowns. If Keenan Allen is considered a wide receiver 1 next week at versus Las Vegas, Mike Williams should be as well. Justin Herbert is doing a good job of getting both these guys highly involved, as 71% of the target share went to him, Allen, and Austin Eckler in this game. Those are 4 very good fantasy options right there. And it was very nice to see Austin Eckler, after he had no targets in week 1, come out and have another good target performance through the air, because that's, again, really the one thing we want to really showcase with Eckler is his receiving prowess. Moving on to Kansas City, and if we had 4 great excellent options over there in the LA Chargers world, how about over here on Kansas City? Because if there was going to be something that we were worried about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, is that Chargers allowing 510 rushing yards through 3 weeks. So if we had, and that's including Edwards today, because if Edwards did not come in with a good performance here, we could really, really be worried about him. But now Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Tony Pollard, Antonio Gibson, and Ezekiel have all rushed for 70 more yards, with both Pollard and Clyde Edwards-Helaire having over 100. The LA Chargers are currently the spot to start running backs against. That means currently Peyton Barber is possibly the start of the week at running back next week. If he is the pseudo starter, we have to see about Josh Jacobs. I understand why they would spend all that money, but we'll talk about the Raiders when we get to the Raiders. But if Clyde didn't do it here, I'd be very overly worried. The receiving touchdown is nice. Still want to see more than 2 targets per game. And a big issue of possibly why the Chiefs are 1-2. Tyreek Hill has currently scored less than 12 points in full PPR in back-to-back weeks. To find another occurrence of that happening, you have to go all the way back to 2017, weeks 5 and 6. If anyone is even remotely underselling Tyreek Hill after these performances, and because the Kansas City Chiefs have signed Josh Gordon, or they're looking to, or he's going to, whatever the semantics of how it actually plays out, Josh Gordon will be a Kansas City Chief some point rather than later. I would not be taking into account this is the 1A, 1B of Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, with Clyde Edwards-Helaire just kind of mixing in whatever it kind of pertains from to do so. But if Gordon does anything, I thinks it makes the peripheral options of Demarcus Robinson, Mecole Hardman. These are players that are no longer really in consideration for you to start at all. If Josh Gordon does anything close to his 2013 performance, cool. But that's 8 years ago. He's played, 8 games or so in the last couple of years. Not anything for me to go out and spend fab on. You're either going to see people go out and spend 5% of their fab on him just as a flyer, or they're just going to put waiver bids in. If they get him, cool. If they don't, they don't. But Josh Gordon would not be the number one waiver priority again. It would be Chuba Hubbard still from the Thursday Night Football game. Don't forget about him. But anything, Josh Gordon for me, I am not recommending anything crazy on him. This is not a must pick up at all. If whatever your worst player is, you can make the decision. If you're carrying 2 kickers, sure, you can then get rid of your second kicker for Josh Gordon. Outside of that, I'm not doing anything like that. Moving on to the New Orleans versus New England game. Now, a few things of note. Unfortunately, I've been kind of busy with school. I also was a little sick today. Some of these upcoming games I don't have as in-depth analysis, unfortunately. So some of these are going to be a little bit shorter, not going to be as long as a podcast today, because I've just been dealing with a little bit of a stomach bug, and I also had a good amount of schoolwork. It's just kind of the nature of the beast, trying to juggle schoolwork and all this sort of stuff, right? But New Orleans wins this one 28-13. The big thing was there was a game with 2 options. One was Alvin Kamara, and the other side was a combination of James White or Damian Harris. Well, James White, unfortunately, got hurt in this game, and Darian Harris was very ineffective. But we'll start with the New Orleans side. Jameis Winston currently has less than 150 passing yards in each of the first 3 weeks. At this pace, even 3,500 total yards for the season is possibly unlikely. I like to think that at a certain point they turn on the Jets and they start playing like an offense that has some substance to it. But right now, Alvin Kamara is the only player I would like to start. Marcus Callaway does come down with a jump ball touchdown in the back of the end zone in this game. But this is a very strong defense. It's going to keep opposing offenses. Outside of, the week 2, we had 4 coaches that were active for the New Orleans Saints game going against Carolina. But otherwise, Kamara and the defense are really the only options I'm looking for on this New Orleans Saints team. Over to the New England side. I said uptick possibly for Harris because we don't know how long James White will be out with the hip injury. IR is a possibility. I don't think it's anything extremely serious to the level of missing the rest of the season or anything like that. But the hip injury is definitely an issue for him. If Harris starts to see some of that receiving work, that is great for us. But the only other thing of note is Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith was a player I was very high on at tight end going into the year with all the money they paid him. So far, that money has turned into 10 receptions for 74 yards and no scores with a very bad interception. Here you go sort of thing. I don't know if that comes as a fumble, but he kind of it looked like a lateral to the New Orleans Saints corner that just goes in for a pick 6. And I'm disappointed extremely with how he is playing out for sure. Arizona versus Jacksonville. Arizona wins this game 31-19, but not a lot of stuff I can come away with this one that I'm happy about. The Arizona defense was not overly sharp, but they were sharp enough. I think it's mostly due to the Jacksonville Jaguars currently being just a bad offense and Trevor Lawrence still struggling to kind of get up to speed with the NFL game. But then no rookie quarterback has looked good. The only one who has a win is Mac Jones, and he won that against Zach Wilson, and the New York Jets. The rookies have been, I don't want to say disappointed. We had pretty high hopes, but it looked like there was confidence that the rookies would be mildly successful, but they've been extremely unsuccessful. And I think it's just, we haven't had any time for them to develop at all. And that's pretty much on us. We wanted to see the rookies, we wanted to see the excitement, but we didn't really getting just poor football out of the whole collective right now. Starting with the Arizona side, no passing touchdowns for Kyler Murray. Great. Moore and Hopkins for 22 yards. Cool. And then Christian Kirk and AJ Green both have over 100 yards, and James Conner scores twice. Also, that whole kick return for a touchdown off the missed field goal. This game was a headache. This game was chaos. The receivers, I think, are going to be a little bit of a mess. Yes, Christian Kirk, I think I saw on Twitter today, has more fantasy points than DeAndre Hopkins. I recently just traded for DeAndre Hopkins, traded Damian Harris and Brandon Cooks for Hopkins straight up. There's some weird things that went on Sunday. This is definitely one of them. Hopkins, to me, is still a top 5 receiver. I'm treating him as such. And the rest of the receivers, I think it's just we're kind of giving Rondale Moore a little bit too much of a heavy leash, that he was going to be a big producer out of the gate. Kirk and Green are all going to have their good and bad weeks. It's just going to be a matter of how risk adverse you are to starting these guys in your lineup. And if you played Kirk and Green, you had a great day. And if you played Moore and Hopkins, you had a bad day. And hopefully Arizona has a much more straightforward sort of approach to it next week. Because I have no idea. But Jacksonville on the other side, nice resurgence game for James Robinson. This is sort of usage we want from him to be a top 24 back after the Travis Etienne injury. That's what I was looking at when you were drafting him. Between him and I guess Marvin Jones, because we do have DJ Chark scoring in this one, but Marvin Jones is still the lead receiver for me as of right now. There's not much from the Jacksonville side I want to roster, because even though Jones has been the best receiver, it has still not been in particularly safe ways and repeatable ways. Excuse me. So we're going to have some weird situations go down with these guys. And it's just a matter of how, again, risk adverse you are to playing the Jacksonville players. Moving on to Cincinnati versus Pittsburgh. Cincinnati wins this game 24-10. The one big thing, again, was the injuries to both sides, with T. Higgins out with some injury situation on the Pittsburgh between Deontay Johnson some defensive players. This was an ugly, gross game on the Pittsburgh side. Cincinnati wins this game with 18 pass attempts. But the Burrow-Chase connection seems real. Only 2 players currently have more touchdowns than Jamar Chase, which would be Cooper Kupp and Aaron Jones, both at 5 to Chase's 4. But Higgins missing the game. Boyd scoring as well was pretty sweet for who started him with the pit injuries. I did talk them up in the Friday show, saying with Higgins out and situation playing out as it is, I did like this game a little more from the Cincinnati side. But I expected better things from Pittsburgh, and a few things went wrong there, and we'll get to that just after stating that Mixon dominates the carries again. This is now back-to-back weeks with no other running back even getting a carry in this backfield. There's a healthy amount of running backs I'd still prefer to Mixon, but he's a locked-in top 12 player as of right now for me. Pittsburgh, Ben Roethlisberger is shot. I understand that Claypool and Juju get hurt in this game, but I look at him and I understand the meme kind of video of him falling down, and I get it looks very funny, laughing point. But he's just not looking good. And then with 58 pass attempts, which is very ineffective, 19 targets to Najee Harris. Nothing really said this game more than the dump off he had on 4th down to just kind of kill the game right at the end. There's just nothing they could do. 19 for Harrison targets, 15 for Claypool. No one else sees more than 5. Juju was hurt relatively early in this game, around the second quarter. If all the receivers are due to miss between Johnson, Juju, and Chase Claypool, James Washington could be on the waiver radar. It took a lot of players getting hurt and a lot of players getting traded away or retiring and going to other teams, right? What say you for Washington to be back on this sort of situation? But James Washington, for me, if he's only going to be the only guy out there, that's somewhat valuable to me, but it might be another 19 target game for Najee Harris. And good to people who took him in round 2. This is an outlier, but it showcases that there is a lot of trust put in Harris. again, he did Devontae Adams yesterday. I think that's the only players to see this insane target total. But currently, he is the leader at running back with targets after this game, beating out DeAndre Swift. And that is just craziness to me. Moving on to New York Jets versus Denver side. Denver wins 26-0. Jets being the only team to get blanked on Sunday. And the one big thing going into the games, can we start anyone on the New York Jets side? And the answer is no. And moving on to Denver. Cortland Sutton, I think eventually is going to take off. Bridgewater is currently third in downfield attempts, and Sutton at one point was leading the league in air yards. Hello, Craig. Nice to see you. Was at one point leading the league in air yards. To see what the stats look like after week 3 finishes. But once they face real competition, I'm really want to see what Sutton can do in this Denver offense, as well as the Broncos running backs. Once again, Gordon was the favorite for Denver, but I want to see what happens when their opponent can actually score points. They've had a very soft start to the season. Gordon actually getting down at the 1 and Javonte Williams coming in for a touchdown. Gordon has outsnapped him in all 3 weeks. He's still the lead back. They've both been productive because at a position that's been pretty gross, because running your RB1 spot, you're at least fairly confident in, unless there's been some weird injury situations. And your RB2, you're just kind of hoping the guy scores 10 points. And right now, Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon are both doing that. So as an RB2, both of these guys have been productive here. Denver has made a choice to use both in very high value situations. So if it continues out like that, well, we're happy for that. We like this. But as of right now, we still have to see when they're playing better competition, what it means for the running back splits, but it is sort of enthusiasm for Cortland Sutton. And unfortunately, KJ Hamler is also going to be out for the rest of the season. I believe it was the Achilles injury. Moving on to Miami versus the Las Vegas. I actually don't have the scores for this. 31-28. Yeah, 31-28 goes the way of Las Vegas. Starting with the Las Vegas side, Carr is just putting up ridiculous numbers. Top 12 quarterback town right now with him and Cousins just really fighting for ordering. Like another 50 total pass attempt sort of game, 350 yards. If it wasn't for how congested the top 12 currently is, with not a lot of quarterback injuries towards the top and also none of the buys, we really be talking him as like a no-brainer, just put him in your lineup sort of scenario. But for right now, it means good things for the receivers. So I think there's going to be just a sort of a volume play with both of Ruggs, Edwards, Waller, of course, with this very good matchup next week against the LA Chargers, especially Payne Barber. I don't understand if they paid all this money for Kenyon Drake. I understand Josh Jacobs is out, but Payne Barber is in line to be a top 24 back next week if he's going to have another 24 for 111-yard performance. He has the easiest matchup right now. The LA Chargers run defense is garbage, and they're allowing 70 yards to 4 different running backs over 3 weeks. If he is the starter, just play Barber. And it feels like a situation where if he does poorly, it feels like we're getting too cute. And if he does great, it feels like it's just we got away with one, we got lucky. So I'm playing him. I'm going to recommend people to play him if he's out there on your waivers. This is one of the better pickups if you're trying to get a win in week 4. And that's all I can really say about that. Going on to the Miami side. One big thing was points, and they scored some points. They did not score enough points to win, but, weird ways for how they scored their points. Pick 6 early in the game, rushing touchdown by Brissett by doing the little Euro step, and he hit them with it twice. He did it in the middle of the field, and then he did it at the goal line, and I was laughing my way seeing him rush that one in. I thought that was so funny to me. And another one for Malcolm Brown, because, of course, why wouldn't he? We kind of felt good about starting Myles Gaskin, but we can't have fun things. Mike Gesicki, though. 12 targets is definitely something to keep an eye on. Someone brought up to me on Twitter talking about the Indianapolis days with Jacoby Brissett, with Jack Doyle when he became something. He was like a Pro Bowl type tight end. If Gesicki is going to see work like this, I like that. He did get 55% of his total targets, though, in this one game. So that is definitely something of note. If it continues, great, because tight end sucks. Running back sucks and tight end sucks. Quarterback's great and receivers are great right now. But 2 positions totally suck. So something just be kind of, it'd be nice for us to have. Not a great start for Will Fuller here. Jalen Waddle definitely appears to be the lead, 13 targets in this one. And Fuller does catch, I believe, a 2-point conversion. But Waddle with the 13 targets, he'd be my highest ranked Miami Dolphin until further notice. To be seen still if we're going to have Tua this week or Jacoby Brissett as well. Moving on to Tampa Bay versus the LA Rams. Rams win this one 34-24. And our one big thing was just who we didn't want to start in this game. So it's going to be a big mosh here, right? So we're starting with the Tampa Bay side. No Tampa Bay running back has a rushing touchdown this season. But we do have rushing touchdowns out of Tom Brady and Chris Godwin because, of course. And it's still going to be a situation where we're a little worried about who we want to start out of these guys because Giovanni Bernard was turned to for his need in the passing work with Tampa Bay falling behind LA late. So it's still going to be an issue of who we're going to be looking at. Fournette is still the best of the bunch, possibly, but I still really don't want to be starting on any of them. And personally, that's just how I am. Moving on to the LA side, though, Stafford just picked apart this defense right now. Cooper Kupp. I had the schedule for the Rams. Just bring it up because I was talking on Twitter that he's just on another level right now, and there's consideration of him being So they play the Arizona Cardinals next week. They're on consideration that Cooper Kupp should be possibly a top 3 ranked receiver next week, and that it's just how he is. He's just leading the league in touchdowns, just another just extremely high scoring performance. I think 30 points was his fantasy point total in full PPR. Woods is just kind of being left by the wayside. Deshaun Jackson, a 75-yard score in this game as well. Tyler Higbee scores. The only one who doesn't have a good day is Woods. And Sony Michel even had 10 fantasy points as well, which is good for him. It was not a spot I wanted to start him. But if you did have to desperation start, at least you came away with some fine point totals out of him. But, man, I don't get it. Robert Woods is kind of not being used very much in this offense. And I'd like to say it comes around eventually. But there's kind of too many good receivers to say that a top 24 receivers sort of slot for Robert Woods in week 4 is a lock. And I really like that Arizona game. And man, he's just not getting there right now. And I don't think there's anything wrong. It's just Cooper Kupp is like open all the damn time. Like it's really like analysis over. It's like Cooper Kupp doesn't have anyone standing near him for like 5 yards, like 3 times a game. And they're like, okay, thank you. We appreciate the gift you're giving us. And he goes and scores. And that's kind of the long and short of it. We don't know. 2 games left. Minnesota and Seattle. Minnesota win this game 30-17. Unfortunately, Dalvin Cook was not active for this game. But fortunately for you, if you listen to me, you started Alexander Madison. It was one of the highest rankers on him in week 3 for fantasypros.com. I said to start over Joe Mixon, David Montgomery, and Antonio Gibson. And, I got some hate for that one. I deserve for Josh Allen, which actually did not get any hate for, so cool. But, man, those 3 running backs are great running backs. And, yes, you should be starting them all the time. But this is a weekly matchup performance sort of game. And I thought Alexander Madison was a great spot to start here against Seattle, who you can pretty much just start anyone against because this defense is garbage. And, 20-something points is what he finished out for you. Alexander Madison, if he starts again next week, it's a different story, but against Seattle here, I thought he was a top 15 running back. I'm very happy with his performance. Good things for that one, of course. But Cousins, Madison, Jefferson, Thielen, all great plays in this one. Just kind of play anyone you want against Seattle. KJ Osborne, unfortunately, did not have a good game, but Tyler Conklin did score. They're just allowing just great fantasy points to their performance to their opponents because Seattle, I thought eventually wouldn't get so lucky, and they were not lucky in this one. Unfortunately, Tyler Lockett was hurt in this game. More info is needed for how long or if he'll miss any sustainable time. Seattle Times are reporting that he has avoided a major injury, quote unquote, but we do need to worry about what that means for the Seattle offense at large and also for Chris Carson. Because Seattle's been a little lucky with the deep ball. We've talked about that for weeks. That it's just they're not having very long sustained drives. They're not getting a ton of work to anyone. It's just they're kind of falling into very good production on big plays. Chris Carson, 15 touches per game currently for him. I'd like to see him be a little bit more involved. I'm not saying 25, but 18. Any touch means points. So the closer we get to 20, the happier I am, especially in an offense where currently he's not really being pushed out by anyone else in this backfield. So I'd like to see him just get a little bit more involved on the Seattle Seahawks side. Does come away with 80 yards, does come away with a score. He is scoring, which is nice, but it's still something of note for sure. And moving on to the last game, Green Bay versus San Francisco. The game that Jimmy G lost, if you look to Twitter, it's all his fault. It definitely wasn't the fact that Devonta Adams got targeted 18 times in this game, and only MVS was targeted more than 2 times. Adams, Jones, and Rodgers, they beat the Niners, but somehow it's still Jimmy G's fault. Again, Green Bay is kind of like Kansas City. It's very much hey, we have 3 guys to talk about. All had good games. Mason Crosby wins it for them late. I think it's, it's our one big thing going into was Aaron Jones in that crazy scoring scenario in week 2. But again, he's currently tied with Cooper Kupp for the lead in touchdowns in the NFL. Non-QB. It's all the skills players. Moving on to the San Francisco side. It is unfortunately not Trey Sermon season because it was Trey Sermon time. That was one big thing, but he did not win away the job like we were kind of hoping him to do so, because you just want one guy to win this in this backfield. If Mitchell is back next week, it's going to be a real toss-up between the two of them as to who is going to be the better performer. But it's going to be just a kind of a struggle to really pick those guys kind of out. But moving on to Jimmy Garoppolo, who I thought actually played a very solid game. That was just a great interception from Jay Alexander. I thought he put the ball exactly where he needed to on George Kittle. Alexander just stole it out of the air. Nice to see Ayuk is still around, scoring a touchdown. Hopefully that gives us some confidence to start him going forward. And the George Kittle usage, 9 targets in this game, that's what we want to see every single week. They would really like to get him involved. I would really like to get him involved. San Francisco, I think, really had this one until late because Devonta Adams is just really good, and you should probably not allow him to get 80 yards on you in 5 seconds. And that will wrap it up for us. The Monday Night Football game is going to be on, or is already on. I'm really excited to see this Philadelphia-Dallas game. So we're going to be back here on Wednesday reviewing this game, previewing all the 1 p.m. and the Thursday Night Football game. I believe it's not as good of a matchup this week. It's like Cincinnati versus someone else terrible. We'll talk about it on Wednesday. But again, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 7:30 Eastern. I'm here previewing, reviewing, talking about the games. Wednesday at 5:30 with John June on Off the Grid, the roster decision and flex show. Tuesdays and Thursdays on the Gridiron Ratings channel, you have Getting Defensive with Gary and the crew. And on the weekend, we got the slate breaking down all of the DFS games with Kyle and Jeff whenever he shows up, but sometimes not Jeff. And so with that, if this is the last time you listen up, I appreciate the time you have spent with me. For GridironRatings.com, I have been Matt McCarthy. Appreciate all the people who have subbed and listened, and we'll see you again on Wednesday.